I'm Stephen Hicks, Executive Director of CEE, and our guest today is Dr. William Kline. Dr. Kline is an expert on David Hume, the 18th century Scottish Enlightenment philosopher, and he spoke today at the Rockford College in the ethical theory class on Hume's contribution to the foundations of moral and political thought. Why in the 21st century should Hume matter to us?
Well, I think there's at least a couple of reasons. One is Hume is very concerned with the origin of property rights and how and when they apply, which I think is perennially important. I also think, too, that there are certain questions, too, that arise about the extent to which free and self-directed human interaction should be allowed, to the extent that that's beneficial for us all. Basic questions of liberty. And I think Hume paints a picture of that deserves to be examined.
Okay. If we paint that picture in broad strokes, certainly Hume's conclusion is the conception of a society that is just. Right? And for him, justice is a fairly expansive concept. What are the major constituent elements of the just society that he would like us to work toward?
His theory of justice is actually going to be constrained to basically property, trade, and contract, which consonant with writers that have come before him, whether Hobbes or Locke. So those who want look at a more expansive view of social justice aren't going to find all of those elements there. But with that said, Hume focuses on these because he thinks that they're central to any society, that they're necessary, and that they have to be stable. And that point you do find even reflected in people, say, for like John Rawls in the theory of justice. The basic rules of justice have to be stable. And so in that sense, his project is the same, and also another reason to read Hume for today.
Okay. So part of the just society is going to be a set of stable principles here, but in terms of content, respect for property, a respect for trade, and respect for contract is going to be the essential firm principles that we have to realize. Now, if we go back to the other part of perhaps more the beginnings or foundations of Hume's philosophy and his moral thinking, he has a reputation, how deserved or not, subject to interpretation here, though, for being a radical subjectivist in his moral theory. So there's obviously a big gap then that has to be bridged if you were starting from radically subjectivistic foundations to ending up with a relatively firm, socially wide conception of a just society. How deserved is Hume's reputation for being a subjectivist in his moral theory?
Well, he is a subjectivist in the fact that moral approbation will be in the eyes of the beholder.
Okay.
The disconnect happens with what people don't realize is that the subjectivity is going to be some sort of intersubjectivity. It's not a solipsistic argument that somehow moral judgments are just generated by me, by my passions, by my sentiments, not in reference to anybody else. That's not going to be his argument. In fact, the whole reason you want society is you can't even live like that. So whatever subjectivity we're going to talk about is going to be an intersubjectivity of human beings that have a certain nature and have certain needs to be met and have to figure out how exactly to do that.
Okay. So if we then start the process where Hume says certain principles will emerge, even if we do start off more atomistically or more individualistically, each with our own subjective evaluations, how does some sort of coordination, right, emerge, or some principles emerge? Can we sketch that process?
Yeah, and I think it's good the way you said it, too. Hume begins, and definitely begins, with a sort of methodological subjectivist individualism, almost like an economist would begin.
Okay.
And you find this approach reflected in modern game theory. You'll find people like Axelrod, Brian Skirms, Robert Sugden, asking, here are individuals with their own subjective preferences interacting with other such individuals, what kind of solutions to different problems can they find? In Hume's case, he's going to talk about property. And the upshot of it is that the strategy people find is that if I leave you alone and you leave me alone, we're both better off. And I will leave you alone if you leave me alone. And there's a lot of traction to be gained from that. Hobbes doesn't see this as a possibility. Hobbes thinks we're just going to attack each other and we need Leviathan to stop us. Hume doesn't. Hume says we can actually learn from our mistakes and we can actually learn to conditionally structure our activities, much as Axelrod tells us today that if I cooperate with you and you cooperate with me, I'll keep cooperating with you.
All right.